So, dear friends, before we jump to the reflection today, I would like to give you a brief flashback about the gospel last Sunday so that we can flow together with the account of today's gospel. So, last week, if you still remember, the gospel told us about the preaching ministry of Jesus. And he was somewhere in a certain place teaching some people. We do not know precisely in what city Jesus was, but for sure, he was not in Jerusalem. And while he was about to conclude his teaching, then suddenly the Pharisees and the scribes came from Jerusalem, and they started criticizing his disciple for eating a meal without hand washing. So that's the situation what happened last Sunday. And eventually, this conversation between the scribes and the Pharisees and Jesus led Jesus to explanation about the food or the traditions that defile people. And eventually, Jesus condemned the Pharisees and the scribes for being hypocrites because they abandoned the commandments of God and teaching human precepts. So that's the situation and also the gospel last Sunday. Now, before we move to the gospel today, actually there is a missing part that we need to learn about what Jesus did in the city where we start in the gospel today, the city of Tyre. So after his encounter with the Pharisees and scribes last week, the gospel of Mark told us that Jesus moved to Tyre. And we didn't know, but we knew is today already in Tyre. But it is something that is missing in the gospel. Tyre is a city that is located in the east coast of Mediterranean Sea. It is outside of the Israel territory. And in modern day, if you look at in the map, the city of Tyre is located in southern of Lebanon and still exists until today. So it is in Lebanon right now. So unfortunately, it was not part of our reflection, neither in the gospel last week nor this Sunday. So we didn't know what's going on there. But I can tell you what happened with Jesus at the time. So the Gospel of Mark actually skip it. There in Tyre, after his encounter with the scribes and the Pharisees, Jesus performed a healing ministry of a daughter of the Syrophoenician woman who was possessed by demons. When Jesus said, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." So it sounds really rough when Jesus said that one. But the woman answered, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." So because of this response or the answer of this woman, Jesus healed the child or the daughter of this woman, the Syrophoenician woman, without physically presence. And all of these situations or this event, the healing ministry of Jesus, happened in Tyre. And this is the missing part of the Gospel of Mark that we never heard before. And unfortunately, it is not part of our reflections neither last Sunday nor today. But today, as it is mentioned in the Gospel, now we know that Jesus has already been in Tyre, a city out of Jerusalem. So the question is, why Tyre? Why the Gospel of Mark today mentions Sidon? These two cities are very important for our reflection today. So the answer is because these two cities are considered the home of the Gentile, the cities that are not part of the Jewish territory. Since it is the Gentile territories, then these two cities are considered the land of those who had been deemed and pronounced unclean. So, if you remember the gospel last Sunday, it was about the tension between Jesus, scribes, and the Pharisees about the tradition that Jesus need to observe before eat a meal. And now Jesus already in the city where the Gentile are present. So, dear friends, after several days in Tyre, eventually Jesus is continuing to be on the move. As it is recorded in today's gospel, he left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, into the district of Decapolis. Now, if we pay attention seriously to the description of this itinerary, it is very strange and confusing. So after the Mass, you may take some time, go home, open the Google, and look at the map. You will get confused. So when we look at this journey on a map, the first thing that stands out is that Jesus appears to make a massive detour by going north to Sidon. Through Sidon, Jesus made his way to the east, back to the south, then back to the Sea of Galilee. So can you imagine Sidon like this? This is Tyre, Sidon here, then the district of Galilee is bottom here. If you are pretty smart, instead of going back to the north, it's better going back all the way to down, right? Or I can give you a description like this. Like someone from Colombia would wants to go to Richmond. So that person takes the way like from Colombia, going up to Baltimore to Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, from Pennsylvania across to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia go to Wilmington, and all the way down to state of Delaware, and eventually cross the sea and reach Richmond. It's too long, right? So it doesn't make sense. So the smartest person is, okay, from Columbia, okay, cross Washington DC, Alexandria, Fredericksburg, and Richmond. That's the closest way. But at this time, we can see here, it is very strange. So that's why I encourage you, if you would like to learn the gospel, open the map. Sidon is in Lebanon. It's not in part of Israel. And Sidon also is in Lebanon. Then suddenly he's going back to the Sea of Galilee. It doesn't make sense. Now, why in the world did Jesus take this trip in this manner, by the way? So it is very difficult to guess for sure why Jesus took this very long route. But one of many reasons is that Jesus needs a space for himself after his encounter with the Pharisees and the scribes, who accused him for not following the tradition of the elders. Since many people knew him, so he needs a time. Just like you, after you spend a week working, eventually sometimes you need time for yourself. Likewise, Jesus here with his disciple, they went to Tyre to take a break. But they going back to his land with a different way because many people knew him. In addition, Jesus took this route in an attempt to gain the necessary seclusion for the instruction of his further ministry. Because if you want to be a good person in doing something responsibly, for sure you will prepare yourself so that everything will be prepared very well. Then you can do something better. The same thing also with Jesus today. So this is the reason of why he went to Tyre, a city where not many people knew him. So in the gospel today, Jesus took a long way back to the Sea of Galilee in purpose. Not only for the good for himself, but also for the good of his disciple. And shortly, I would say that Jesus just needed a space for himself and had no intention to avoid people who knew him. Now, on the way to Galilee, he encounters a person who is deaf. Again, it happened not in the land of Israel, but rather in the land of Gentiles. So, here, let us take a look at the gospel today. People brought him a deaf man who had a speech impediment and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him off by himself, away from the crowd. He put his finger into a man's ear, spitting, touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, be open. Now, it's very clear here, the instruction and what Jesus did in the land of the Gentiles. So let us take a look at carefully these particular verses. First of all, we have to understand here. In the ancient society of Israel, it was very common that some people would think that a person who was born deaf must be unable to speak by nature. Others think that it was unable to speak because of distemper or disaster that caused him to become a deaf, or at least thick of hearing, and for this reason he had a speech impediment. So at this point, we don't have specific informations, but we do know that he was deaf and had a speech impediment. What kind of speech impediment? We have no clue, but it says in the gospel today, he had a speech impediment. So when Jesus encountered him, he took him off by himself, away from the crowd, for healing. So since people asked him to lay his hand on him, that means people already knew him. So Jesus was famous, Jesus was well known, but he was not as well as in his land, because a lot of tension over there. But that's why today we hear people brought him a deaf man asking for healing. No, this is the interesting part here. Ordinary, Jesus does his miracle publicly before all people. The intention is to show that they would bear the true witness for him. I give you example. For instance, the multiplication of bread. The multiplication of bread and fish. Jesus did it in front of people so that they know that he is Messiah. But not at this point, by the way. At this point, in today's gospel, Jesus did healing miracles privately. That's why he took him off by himself, away from the crowd for healing. Now, the reason why did he do that? It is because Jesus wanted to show them that he did not seek his own glory in front of people. Now, we can see the humility of people, the humility of Jesus here. That he took that man for healing, but privately. Usually he did it in front of people so that people know him and believe that he is a Messiah. But at this point, Jesus did by himself, privately. Now, after took a distance from a people, he used more significant action than usual. We pay attention, he put his finger into the ears of the deaf man, spat upon his own finger, and then touched his tongue. It is very unique, unusual here. So what Jesus did to the deaf man was considered unclean manner according to the Jewish purification law. Remember, last week when the Pharisees and the scribes saw the disciple of the Lord were eating without washing their hands, they criticized him. But at this point, Jesus did in reverse. Okay, he put his finger into the deaf man, spat upon his finger, and touched his tongue. It sounds a little bit disgusting than what the disciple did last Sunday. But today, we can see here, it is very unique. So for some disciples who saw what Jesus did, they would think that Jesus did not follow or ignore the tradition of the elders. But by doing so, Jesus did not against the tradition of the elders, but rather to show them what they think can defile themselves could be the instrument of healing. So therefore, a miracle based on the compassion and mercy that comes from the heart could happen not only through the uncommon manner, but also to the Gentile who are excluded from the Jewish society, just like the deaf man in the gospel today. So, as we can see this one, we can see how extraordinary and also marvelous what Jesus did to the person who is not considered as a Jew, but also he did it in a different way. Now, dear friends, as we move forward here, in the process of healing, the deaf man wants to hear and speak. Another thing that Jesus did, this groaning, and he looked up upon heaven. Looking up at the heaven is an act of prayer to give thanks to the Father, to give his Father praise, for he did his will. And as a mediator of God, Jesus acted in dependence on him and with an eye to him. So here, he signified that it was by divine power, a power that the Lord from heaven, that he did this, healed that deaf man. So therefore, by doing so, Jesus also directed the deaf man who could see, though he could not hear, to look up to heaven for relief. So looking up to heaven is not only just like a let us pray. It is an act of thanksgiving to the Father, for he is dependent on him who gave the power to heal. And also invite him to give thanks to the Lord for relief, because this is the miracle that Jesus is going to do it for him. And then he mentioned about another thing, that he is groaning. Groaning signifies he expressed his pity for the misery of human life, not this person, because this person's, the deaf man, represents the whole people, not only him. So he expressed his pity for the miseries of the human life, and also his sympathy with the afflicted in their afflictions. So as to the deaf man, Jesus groaned not because it was a lot to do with him, nor he did it with reluctantly, but because of the many temptations which he would be exposed to. And as the sins, he would be in danger after restoring of his speech to him, which before he was free. In other words, I would say like this: it would be better for him to be tongue-tied still, unless he has the grace to keep his mouth silent. So this is why Jesus groaned, because he knew what can happen with this person if he received everything. He can say many things. The sins could have happened to him also. So now, eventually Jesus mentioned about ephata, which means be open. One thing we need to understand here is that Christ heals the deaf man with authority. It means when he said ephata, he speaks as one having authority and power went along with the word. Be opened, serve both parts of the cure. Let the ears be opened, let the lips be opened. So let him hear and speak freely, and let the restraint be taken off. And the effects was incredible. Immediately that man's ears were opened, his speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. So that's the miracle what we learned today, how incredible Jesus did to this man. And dear friends, finally, after the hearing and speech are restored, Jesus ordered the people not to tell anyone and asked them to keep his healing experience in private. But as we can see in today's gospel, they made it public, because the more he ordered it, the more they do it. So what we can learn is that about his humility of Jesus. He charged them not to tell anyone, since Jesus did not seek his own glory. In our case, most people will proclaim their own goodness when they do something good to others, or at least they desire that others should proclaim it for themselves, so that they would be well known. And if it is necessary, then they might advertise it for the sake to gain fame for themselves. Christ, in other words, especially in today's gospel, would set us an example of humility. We should take pleasure in doing good, but not in its being known or famous, nor boasting in front of others for doing something good. So today, in this Sunday, we are so fortunate actually, because we learn from our gospel the healing account of St. Mark. What we heard into this gospel about the healing of the deaf and the mute man is only account which is not recorded by other gospel. If you try to find this account, the story about the deaf man, you go directly to the Gospel of Mark, because it is only in the Gospel of Mark that we can learn the humility of Jesus. Jesus, in one hand, is a Messiah, but also he gave us a good example, especially in humility. And today, precisely, we learn how Jesus taught us how to be humble.